Have you ever reached a point where you gave someone your whole heart, and they crushed it in front of everyone? I mean really crushed it, without shame, without care. What would you do if the person you trusted most humiliated you when you were carrying their child? Stay with me. This story isn't just painful, it's powerful. And trust me, the way she rises from it all, you'll want to see every second. Now let's begin. The music was still playing when he said it. Surrounded by polished glasses, twinkling fairy lights, and the clink of silverware, he leaned in close enough for the scent of his cologne to sting her nostrils. His voice, low but sharp like a blade, cut through the soft hum of the dinner party. You look disgusting, pregnant Clara. Honestly, I'm embarrassed. For a moment, everything around her blurred. The guests' laughter, the sparkling chandeliers, the polite conversations drifting through the air like smoke. All of it drowned beneath the weight of those 6 cruel words. Clara Hartley, 6 months pregnant, blinked back the tears before they could betray her. Her hand instinctively covered her swollen belly, as if to shield her unborn child from the venom in his voice. The man sitting next to her, once her protector, her lover, her husband, didn't even flinch. Nathaniel Whitmore, the man everyone in the room fawned over, tech mogul, media darling, guest of honor, was now looking at her with cold indifference. A man who had once whispered dreams into her ear, now recoiled at the life growing inside her. He reached for his wine glass as if nothing had happened. She sat frozen, her heart screaming, while her face remained porcelain calm. That moment, in the middle of a glittering gala hosted in their honor, would be the one that shattered her. The one where Clara Hartley disappeared. And something else. Something stronger, smarter, more dangerous, was born in her place. 3 hours earlier, she had picked out the silver dress carefully. It clung to her bump, yes, but she thought it looked elegant. She had curled her chestnut hair, dabbed on soft makeup, and even slipped into the silver heels she used to love. All for him. All to show him that even in pregnancy she could still be the woman he once adored. She remembered how his eyes skimmed past her as she entered the room, how he didn't say a word of compliment, how his phone never left his hand. And now, here they were. Public humiliation disguised behind designer suits and charity toasts. "Excuse me," she whispered, pushing back her chair as quietly as she could. No one noticed, not even him. The bathroom mirror reflected a stranger. Her face looked tired, pale under the soft light. Her mascara was starting to bleed from the corners. She leaned over the sink, breathing through the pressure in her chest, the hard thud of her baby's foot beneath her ribs. She had tried to be the perfect wife. The smiling woman beside the powerful man. The support system behind the empire. But that empire, it turned out, had no room for her once she stopped being the ornament and started being real, vulnerable, emotional, visibly pregnant. Outside, the party roared on. Nathaniel would be laughing now, maybe whispering in someone else's ear. Clara had seen the messages, the long nights at the office, the unfamiliar perfume lingering on his suits. She had known, deep down, what he was becoming. But tonight, he showed her who he really was. Her phone buzzed inside her clutch. A message from her doctor, just a routine reminder, but it felt like the only tether to reality she had left. She was still carrying life, still holding on to something beautiful, even if the man who gave it to her had turned into something she could barely recognize. She stepped out of the bathroom and walked through the back exit instead of returning to her table. The cold night air bit through her dress, but she welcomed it. She walked, block after block, her heels in one hand, her clutch in the other. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was from a blocked number. "Are you safe?" it read. She stared at it for a long moment before replying. "Yes. Not for long, but I will be." Then she turned off her phone. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't know who she would become. But Clara Hartley, the woman who waited and hoped and begged for love, that woman had died tonight. And from her ashes, something else was rising. Clara Hartley was not going to cry anymore. Before she became that woman at the gala, Clara Hartley was invisible in all the wrong ways. 31 years old, she had once believed in slow mornings and long kisses. She worked as an editorial assistant for a small publishing house in Manhattan, where her days were filled with manuscripts, red pens, and strong black coffee. The pay wasn't glamorous. The office didn't have floor-to-ceiling windows or catered lunches, but she loved it. She loved the smell of ink and the promise of stories still being written. Clara was the kind of woman people trusted instantly. She smiled easily, listened more than she spoke, wrote thank-you notes by hand. Her parents had died when she was 23, a car accident that shattered her world just as she was starting to build it. Since then, she lived alone in a tiny, warm apartment lined with books and watercolor paintings. Until Nathaniel came along. He swept in like a tidal wave. All sharp suits, electric charm, and ambitious fire. A self-made millionaire by 30, Nathaniel Whitmore was the golden boy of New York's tech scene. He had launched a fintech startup that IPO'd in less than 3 years. Investors loved him. Magazines photographed him. Everyone else either envied him or wanted to be him. Clara met him at a book launch. She was organizing the author Q&A. He was there by accident, dragged by a friend. He liked the way she talked about narratives, said she had an old soul and dangerous eyes. He asked her out that night. 6 months later, he moved into her apartment. Within a year, they were married. And that was when Clara stopped being seen. She traded her cozy book-filled apartment for a sleek penthouse that felt more like a showroom than a home. She left her job at his urging. "You deserve to rest. Let me take care of us," he said, and poured her days into supporting his career. Dinners with investors, weekend retreats, gala events where she smiled beside him in dresses chosen by his stylist. At first, she convinced herself it was a fair trade. Nathaniel worked long hours, but he brought her flowers on Fridays. He missed dates, but made up for it with diamond earrings. He said he loved her, and she wanted to believe him. But slowly, the cracks widened. He became dismissive, critical, cold. "Why do you wear things that hide your shape? You wouldn't understand. It's complicated. Don't wait up, I'll be late." Clara stopped bringing up her old dreams, the children's book she wanted to write, the editing career she missed. Every time she tried, he changed the subject, or rolled his eyes, or walked away. When she found out she was pregnant, she was terrified to tell him. Not because she thought he'd be angry, but because she feared he wouldn't care. To her surprise, he smiled. He even kissed her forehead and said, "You'll be a great mom." For a few weeks, hope bloomed again. She decorated the nursery herself, painted soft stars on the walls. She read parenting books and listened to classical music for the baby. She talked to the bump as if it were her best friend. She still believed in something then, if not in Nathaniel, at least in the life they had created together. But Nathaniel grew distant again. Long nights, mysterious calls, sudden trips. Clara didn't ask. She was too exhausted, too full of worry and nausea and backaches. Her world had shrunk to the size of their apartment and the weight of her baby. And then came the gala, the moment that would burn away every illusion. The moment he looked at her, his pregnant wife carrying his child, and said she looked disgusting. He wasn't just cruel, he was done. And something inside her was done too. Clara Hartley had no family left, no job, no savings account of her own. She hadn't published the book, hadn't traveled to Paris like she once dreamed. She didn't even have friends she could call at 2 a.m. But she had something more dangerous than money. She had nothing left to lose. She had spent years dimming her light to make someone else shine. And now, it was her turn. The Whitmore estate wasn't just a house. It was a declaration of dominance. Perched atop the cliffs of Montauk, the sprawling mansion stretched across 8 acres of oceanfront property. With its white stone facade, Roman columns, and rooftop helipad, it looked less like a home and more like a palace imported from a billionaire's fever dream. Tour helicopters flew overhead on summer weekends, pointing it out like a landmark. Locals called it the fortress. To Clara, it had always felt more like a museum, stunning, cold, and meant to be looked at, never touched. She had lived here for nearly 2 years, but her fingerprints weren't on anything. Not the abstract art Nathaniel bought at auction, not the leather-bound books he never read, not the cold steel kitchen she wasn't allowed to cook in. Her clothes hung in a separate wing, selected by his personal stylist. Even the nursery was designed by a team he hired, its pastel perfection ordered like a magazine spread. And tonight, that mansion was hosting the Whitmore Foundation's annual gala. It was the kind of event that made the news. Private security lined the marble steps. Guests in custom designer gowns and tailored tuxedos sipped cocktails under floating crystal chandeliers imported from Italy. The pool glowed blue in the distance, with synchronized swimmers performing underwater routines. A live string quartet played on a rotating glass platform. Tables were set with gold-rimmed dinnerware and custom name cards handwritten by a calligrapher flown in from France. The floral centerpieces alone, towering white orchids, roses, and hydrangeas, cost more than Clara's entire yearly salary from her old job. Nathaniel liked to call it good optics. Clara knew it was something else. Control. Everything in this mansion, down to the curve of each stair railing, was built to reflect Nathaniel's success, his power, his image. He never missed a chance to remind guests how far he'd come from his humble beginnings. The house was filled with people tonight, but Clara had never felt more alone. She stood near the grand staircase, holding a flute of sparkling water, her other hand cradling the curve of her belly. The dress she wore shimmered silver under the chandelier light, tasteful, elegant, and chosen by a stylist who didn't even ask her preference. She didn't recognize most of the people in the room. Investors, politicians, socialites, women with impossible cheekbones, men with shark smiles and $100,000 watches. Everywhere she looked, someone was taking a photo, for Instagram, for Page 6, for Nathaniel's press team. She was there to complete the image, the devoted, pregnant wife of New York's golden boy. Across the room, Nathaniel stood with his back to her, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his laugh loud and performative. He was surrounded by men in suits and a tall blonde in a plunging emerald dress, who touched his arm a little too casually, a little too often. Clara's chest tightened. She hadn't eaten all day. The nausea was back, not from pregnancy, but from dread. The sound of Nathaniel's voice was different when he was around certain people, richer, smugger, like a mask he wore just for them. She remembered when that voice had made her feel special. Now it just made her sick. "Mrs. Whitmore," someone greeted from behind her. Clara turned and forced a polite smile, a couple from Nathaniel's board. She nodded, said all the right things. Yes, the baby was due in 3 months. No, she wasn't sure about names yet. Yes, she was very excited. She excused herself as quickly as she could, slipping through a side hallway toward the back veranda. The cool night air brushed her skin, and for the first time that evening, she exhaled. The garden beyond the mansion stretched like a dream, rose bushes trimmed into perfect spirals, a reflecting pool with floating candles, a stone fountain trickling softly beneath the moonlight. It should have felt like paradise. Instead, it felt like a trap, wrapped in ribbon. A soft voice called her name. Clara turned to see Lydia Prescott, Nathaniel's assistant. Young, hyper-efficient, always dressed like she was on her way to a Vogue photo shoot. "I just wanted to check in," Lydia said, lowering her voice. "Are you okay?" It caught Clara off guard. No one ever asked her that anymore. She gave the only answer she knew how to give. "I'm fine." Lydia hesitated, then reached into her clutch and passed Clara a small envelope. "He told me to deliver this to you after the gala," she said. "But I think you should have it now." Clara frowned. "Who? He said you'd know." Then Lydia turned and vanished into the crowd. Clara stood alone on the marble steps, the envelope suddenly heavier than it should be. Inside, a handwritten note. One line. "They think you're just decoration. Make them regret it." No signature. Just a symbol. 3 small stars drawn in the corner. Her pulse quickened. She recognized that symbol. It was her mother's. Her late mother, who had died in silence and left behind a trail of secrets Clara had never dared to follow. But now, for the first time, something cracked open inside her. Something old. Something powerful. She looked back through the glass doors of the ballroom. The music swelled. Cameras flashed. Laughter rang out. But it all felt distant, because Clara Hartley had just remembered who she really was. And soon, so would everyone else. Nathaniel Whitmore wasn't born into money. That was the first thing he made sure everyone knew. It was his favorite line in interviews, in speeches, in toasts at galas like the one held in his mansion that night. "I built this from nothing," he would say, lifting a crystal glass filled with 30-year-old scotch. No silver spoon, just grit and grind. It was a compelling story, one that made investors trust him, the media worship him, and the world fall for him. But it wasn't entirely true. Nathaniel was smart. No one could deny that. He had a knack for identifying weaknesses, whether in failing companies or in people. He knew how to charm, how to promise just enough to hook you, how to disappear the moment you became inconvenient. He called it strategy. Clara would later realize it was manipulation. In college, he had been the guy every girl wanted. Not just for his looks, though the tailored suits and perfect jawline didn't hurt, but for his confidence, his certainty. Nathaniel didn't ask for things, he expected them. Success, admiration, obedience. Clara didn't stand a chance. When he met her, she was still working her way up in publishing. Quiet, dreamy, safe. She didn't come from money. She didn't care about brands or status. She laughed at his ego, gently challenged his ideas. At the time, it fascinated him. She didn't worship him like the others. That made her a puzzle. And Nathaniel loved puzzles. He pursued her relentlessly, sending flowers, showing up at her office with takeout, making her feel like the most important person in the world. He told her she grounded him, made him better. Said he was done with the fast life, the empty parties, the girls who only loved him for his bank account. But the truth was, Nathaniel never left that world. He just learned to hide it better. He moved fast, too fast. Within a year, Clara had given up her job, moved into his sleek penthouse, and become a supporting character in the story of his success. He insisted it was temporary, just until things settle, but nothing ever really settled with Nathaniel. He needed control like oxygen. At first, he dressed it as protection. "I don't want you overworking yourself. You don't need to take the subway anymore. I'll send a car. Why deal with your old landlord when we could just buy the building?" But then came the suggestions. "You'd look better in something tighter. Maybe skip the carbs tonight. We've got that gala. Don't speak up too much in front of Collins. He's old school." Slowly, Clara stopped recognizing herself. By the time she realized how far she'd drifted, she was already married, already pregnant, already trapped in a glass house designed by a man who never truly saw her, only her reflection in his polished, self-constructed world. And then, there were the women. It started with subtle clues. A lipstick on a wine glass that wasn't hers. Receipts from restaurants she hadn't been to. Business trips extended by a few days, always somewhere warm, always with a vague excuse. Clara wanted to believe the best. She told herself he was just stressed, distracted, under pressure. She reminded herself of the man who once rubbed her back when she had the flu, who kissed her knuckles during thunderstorms. But that man was long gone. In his place stood Nathaniel Whitmore, CEO. Icon. Liar. What Clara didn't know, at least not fully yet, was that Nathaniel had already begun building a future without her. Her pregnancy, once something he pretended to celebrate, became a burden in his eyes, something messy, physical, public. A reminder that Clara was no longer the pristine, arm-candy wife he paraded around cocktail parties. He said all the right things in public, but behind closed doors, "You've let yourself go. You used to care how you looked." "I didn't sign up for this." Clara began shrinking into silence. Meanwhile, Nathaniel bloomed in the spotlight, crafting an image that had nothing to do with fatherhood or family, and everything to do with fame. Then came her. Juliette Rousseau, French model turned tech influencer. 26, all legs and lipstick, with an Instagram following of 3 million and a wellness brand that sold overpriced water bottles and motivational quotes. She slid into Nathaniel's DMs. He answered. She sent photos. He flew her in. It didn't take long. Clara had seen the texts. She had heard whispers. Nathaniel didn't even try to hide it anymore. Not really. The way he smiled when Juliette's name popped up on his phone. The way he defended her business acumen in meetings. The way he disappeared for days and returned smelling like bergamot and regret. But the gala? That was different. That night, Nathaniel didn't just disrespect Clara. He humiliated her. He brought Juliette to his own event, kept her nearby, close enough for photographers to wonder, far enough to deny anything publicly. Then when Clara asked him quietly, begged him to stop, to be discreet, to at least wait until after the baby, he leaned in and delivered the blow that would echo forever. "You look disgusting, pregnant, not tired, not stressed, not this is hard on us, disgusting." The word gutted her. It wasn't just about appearance, it was about erasure. About how, in his mind, she had become a problem to manage, an inconvenience, a body he didn't want beside him in photos anymore. In that moment, Nathaniel showed his cards. He didn't love her. He didn't respect her. He didn't fear losing her, because he never believed she could leave. That was Nathaniel's greatest flaw. He underestimated quiet people. He mistook Clara's loyalty for weakness. He thought control meant victory. What he didn't realize, what no powerful man ever truly understands, is that when you break someone who loved you deeply, you don't get the same person back. You get someone dangerous. Someone who remembers. And Clara Hartley? She was done forgetting. The sound of crystal glasses clinking echoed through the marble halls of the Whitmore estate as the gala reached its crescendo. Waiters in black and white tuxedos flowed like shadows across the ballroom, topping off champagne flutes and clearing empty plates stacked with truffle risotto and foie gras. Outside, the moon hung low over the ocean, casting a silver glow across the terrace. Inside, the temperature was rising, not from the weather, but from the brewing tension that no one seemed to notice yet. Everyone except Clara. She stood near the side of the room, alone. 6 months pregnant and dressed in a custom silver gown that hugged her bump, she looked radiant to some, at least to those with hearts that still beat for empathy. But to Nathaniel, she was, in his words, off-brand, a distraction from his curated image. He hadn't looked at her all night. Not once, not during the dinner, not during the speeches, not even when photographers asked for one with the lovely wife. Instead, he posed with investors, tech CEOs, a few young models whose names Clara didn't know, but whose laughter carried like daggers through the crowd. And then there was Juliet. Juliet Rousseau, in an emerald green dress that glittered like envy. Every time she touched Nathaniel's arm, Clara felt something in her ribs splinter. People whispered. Some looked at Clara with pity, others with curiosity, but no one said anything, because no one crosses Nathaniel Whitmore. Clara placed a hand on her belly, feeling the flutter of a kick. "Steady," she whispered to herself. Then it happened. The moment that would live in her memory forever, not because it was painful, but because it was clarifying. Nathaniel stepped onto the stage at the front of the ballroom, flanked by 2 board members and Juliet, who stood just a few steps behind, her smile coy. A hush fell over the room. Cameras flashed, the orchestra stopped mid-note. He raised a glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "thank you for joining us tonight to support the Whitmore Foundation's vision for the future, tech education for underprivileged youth across the country." A wave of polite applause. Clara watched him from the shadows. He continued, his voice dripping with confidence. "When I think of the future, I think of innovation, of power, of possibility. And tonight, I want to share that future with someone who inspires me every day." Clara's heart fluttered. For one brief, foolish second, she thought he meant her. Then he turned to Juliet. "This woman," he said, gesturing toward her, "reminds me to dream bigger, to think faster, to never settle for what's expected." More applause. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. She took a step forward involuntarily. Her heels clicked softly on the marble floor. No one noticed. Nathaniel leaned in and kissed Juliet on the cheek. The camera bulbs went wild. And then he said it. "To Juliet Rousseau, my future and the reason I believe in evolution." There it was, a declaration. Not subtle, not accidental. A public coronation of the woman he'd been sleeping with, in front of donors, friends, family, and Clara. Some gasped, others awkwardly clapped. Clara couldn't move. Her body froze as if her bones had turned to glass. The room spun, the music swelled again, and just like that, the moment was absorbed by the celebration, swallowed like it had never happened. She stood there, trembling, as people around her started dancing again. Juliet laughed at something Nathaniel whispered. Someone passed her a drink. A photographer snapped a shot of them, backlit by chandeliers. Clara turned. She walked, slowly, deliberately, toward the garden doors. She made it just past the hedge-lined corridor before the tears came. They were silent, hot, endless. She lowered herself onto a stone bench, her hand still on her stomach, her entire body shaking. She couldn't breathe. How could he? How could he humiliate her like this? Was she a ghost now? A prop? A mistake he had to erase from the narrative of his greatness? A soft breeze rustled the roses nearby. Clara stared out at the ocean. Her baby kicked again, as if in protest. That was when she heard the footsteps. Light, careful, approaching. She wiped her tears quickly, standing upright, ready to face whoever dared come near. It was Juliet, the mistress, the woman who had taken everything. She stood there, flawless, holding a flute of champagne with nails that looked like they were painted in gold leaf. "I didn't know you'd still be here," Juliet said, not apologetic, just factual. Clara didn't answer. Juliet shrugged, walking slowly toward her. "You should go inside. It's not good for the baby to be out in the cold." The audacity of it made Clara laugh, just once, bitterly. Juliet cocked her head. "I know you think I'm the villain," she said. "But let's be honest, you knew what this was. Nathaniel doesn't like normal." Clara clenched her fists. "He liked me just fine before you." "No, honey," Juliet said with a sad smile. "He liked the idea of you, the quiet wife, the invisible partner, the placeholder." Clara felt her whole body tense, her pulse pounding in her ears. Juliet sipped her drink. He needed someone exciting, someone with reach, someone who looks good in photos. She glanced at Clara's belly. You became inconvenient." Clara's hand curled protectively over her stomach. "Leave," she said, her voice trembling but firm. Juliet raised an eyebrow. "Fine. Just thought I'd say goodbye. He's announcing the separation soon, you know. Lawyers are all ready." Clara cut her off with a look so sharp, Juliet took a step back, and that's when it happened. Clara didn't cry again. She didn't scream, didn't beg. She just smiled. A slow, steady, dangerous smile. "Tell Nathaniel," she said, "he'll regret underestimating me." Juliet hesitated. Clara turned and walked away, not because she was defeated, but because she was just getting started. The next morning, Clara couldn't move. The sunlight poured through the glass walls of the penthouse bedroom like judgment. Everything was too bright, too quiet. Even the sounds of the city below, honking taxis, distant sirens, felt muted, like she was underwater. Her silver gown lay in a crumpled heap on the floor, one sleeve still inside out. Her makeup had stained the pillow. Her eyes burned, swollen from crying through the night. She hadn't slept. Not really. She had tried to tell herself it was just a nightmare. That the man who once swore to love her hadn't toasted to his mistress while she stood yards away, visibly pregnant and barely breathing. But it wasn't a nightmare. It was real. And now she was here, still pregnant, still alone, still carrying the weight of a man who looked at her like she was a burden instead of a miracle. Clara sat up slowly, every movement deliberate, as if her body might betray her if she moved too fast. Her head pounded, her back ached, her chest was hollow. She reached for her phone. Dozens of unread messages, emails, missed calls. She deleted them all without opening them. There was no one she wanted to hear from. Not Lydia. Not Nathaniel's publicist. Not anyone who had stood there and watched her be destroyed like it was entertainment. She wanted to disappear. And that's exactly what she did. Clara packed a small bag, just enough for a few days. A couple maternity dresses, comfortable flats, a notebook she hadn't touched in months. She left her wedding ring on the marble countertop next to a half-finished cup of herbal tea. Then she walked out of the penthouse without saying a word. No driver, no assistant, no press release. Just a woman in a black coat carrying the pieces of her broken world in a canvas bag. She checked into a small hotel downtown, one with no doorman, no concierge, and no curious eyes. The kind of place where no one asked questions. The sheets smelled like bleach, the walls were thin, but for the first time in months, Clara could breathe. She turned off her phone. Then she climbed into bed, pulled the covers up to her chin, and let herself fall apart. She cried. Not quietly, not gracefully. She wept like her soul had been ripped open. Like every word Nathaniel had said at the gala had carved a new scar into her. She cried for the baby growing inside her, for the woman she used to be, for the dreams she buried when she married a man who made her feel invisible. At some point, the tears ran dry. The silence that followed was worse. Numbness. She lay there for hours, maybe days. It blurred together. She ate only when the baby reminded her she had to. She sat in the shower fully clothed, letting the water pour over her like baptism, but no salvation came. Each time she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Gone was the polished wife with the rehearsed smile, the woman who posed for gala photos beside the man who broke her. In her place was someone quieter, someone raw, someone dangerous. Clara began writing in the notebook. Not because she had a plan, but because the words needed somewhere to go. She wrote everything she had never said aloud. He made me believe I wasn't enough. I disappeared trying to make him visible. He smiled when I broke. Page after page, anger bled onto the paper. So did grief. So did shame. But underneath it all, a spark. She remembered who she was before him. She remembered the stories she wanted to publish, the children's books she outlined in a Google Doc that hadn't been opened since her engagement. She remembered the apartment with the peeling walls and the used couch that felt more like home than any mansion ever had. She had given up everything for a man who wouldn't even offer her dignity in return. No more. One night, as snow began falling outside her hotel window, Clara stood barefoot in the middle of the room and whispered to her reflection in the mirror. "You're still here." It was the first time she'd spoken in days. She said it again, louder. "You're still here." Her baby kicked in response. She cried again, but this time not from pain. This time it was something else, a release. The next morning she dressed with care, black leggings, a soft cream sweater, no makeup, just her. She walked 2 blocks to a coffee shop and ordered a decaf latte. The barista smiled at her, not because she was Mrs. Whitmore, but because she looked tired and real. She sat by the window and watched the world move. No one recognized her. No one stared. It was beautiful. She reached for her notebook and kept writing. Not about Nathaniel, about herself, about the future, about strength. She didn't know how she'd rebuild yet. She had no plan. No money that wasn't tied to her husband's accounts. No idea where she'd live once the hotel money ran out. But she had breath in her lungs. She had a child growing inside her who deserved better. And most importantly, she had herself. Wounded, yes, but still standing. And that meant something. Because broken women rebuild with steel. And Clara Hartley was done being silent. It happened on a rainy Thursday, 2 weeks after Clara vanished from the public eye. Nathaniel was in his downtown office, 20 floors above the chaos of Manhattan, sipping aged bourbon at 10 a.m., scrolling through an email thread about narrative control. The tabloids had begun speculating about Clara's absence. Some outlets whispered of a private health retreat. Others floated rumors of a divorce. Nathaniel, of course, said nothing. That's what his PR team was for. In truth, he hadn't heard from Clara at all. Not a single message. No calls. No lawyers. Nothing. He assumed she was sulking somewhere, heartbroken, brooding, hiding behind shame, maybe. He couldn't have been more wrong. Because Clara wasn't hiding. She was preparing. And the first strike came in the form of an envelope. It was hand-delivered by a suited man with no name tag, no ID, just a calm expression and a firm tone. For Mr. Whitmore, immediate delivery. Nathaniel's assistant tried to intercept it, but the man refused. "It's from someone he knows," she insisted. Nathaniel opened it carelessly, half distracted, ready to toss it into the trash. But when he unfolded the crisp cream stationery, the color drained from his face. There were only 3 things inside: a note, a photo, and a business card. The note was written in Clara's handwriting, clean, controlled, precise. "You should have asked who I was before you chose who to become." The photo was a decades-old picture. Clara as a child, no more than 6, sitting on the lap of a woman with snow-white hair and piercing gray eyes. He recognized the woman instantly. Vivian Langston, old money, tech royalty, billionaire matriarch, founder of Langston Holdings, one of the most powerful private conglomerates in North America. The card beneath the photo was embossed with gold lettering. Clara Langston Hartley, Managing Director, Langston Global Trust. Nathaniel sat frozen, the glass slipping from his hand, bourbon splashing across his desk. Clara. Langston. His Clara. The same woman he once dismissed as forgettable, too plain, a convenience. The one he paraded at events like a silent mannequin. The one he left behind for Instagram models and corporate ladder climbers. She wasn't just anybody. She was heir to a legacy bigger than his ego could ever comprehend. And now, she had come to collect. Back in her hotel suite, Clara stood by the window, watching the rain beat on the glass. She wasn't hiding anymore. After 2 weeks in quiet isolation, she had called a number she swore she'd never use again. It belonged to her grandmother's most trusted advisor, Franklin Ames, a man who had served as Langston Global's lead counsel for over 30 years. He answered on the first ring. "I was wondering how long it would take," he said, voice warm with relief. "Your grandmother always said, when Clara rises, the world better brace itself." Clara didn't cry when she heard his voice. She didn't feel small or overwhelmed. She felt ready. Franklin had met her at the hotel the next day. He brought files, trust documents, legal options, and most importantly, access. Clara's trust fund, previously dormant by her own choice, had been activated the moment she turned 30. Her refusal to use it until now was a quiet rebellion, a promise she made to herself when she married Nathaniel, that she would build a life without legacy, without old money, without expectations. But that life was dead now, and from its ashes something new had to rise. "You're not here to run," Franklin said that day, placing the documents on the table. "You're here to reclaim." Clara nodded. They spent hours crafting her next move, not with rage, not with chaos, with precision. Clara wasn't interested in revenge for drama's sake. She wanted exposure. She wanted control. She wanted the truth. And so she began. Step 1. She rejoined Langston Global as a managing director, a role left open for her since she turned 25. She declined a press release. No photos, no announcement. Let them find out when it was too late. Step 2. She quietly began pulling her name from anything tied to Whitmore Enterprises, her investments, her shares, even the joint real estate trust Nathaniel used to build their mansion. Everything she could unlink, she did, with surgical accuracy. Step 3. She met with one of the most ruthless divorce attorneys in New York. "You have a solid prenup," the lawyer said, reviewing the files. "But there's one loophole. Hidden assets tied to marital branding. If he used your image to build partnerships or secure funding, and we can prove that, you have a case for breach." Clara smiled. "He used me in every investor pitch. I was the proof of stability, of maturity, of trustworthiness." "Well then," the lawyer replied, "let's give him instability, maturity with clause, trust, revoked." Clara wasn't planning on a public war. She didn't want spectacle, but she also didn't want silence. She scheduled one interview with a legacy magazine known for deep profiles and low gossip. She told her story calmly, not about the affair, not about Juliet, but about identity, about losing yourself in someone else's shadow, about what it takes to reclaim your power, quietly but completely. The article hit within a week. Its headline, "The Billionaire Wife Who Was Never Just a Wife." It didn't name Nathaniel. It didn't have to. Everyone knew. Clara didn't return to the penthouse. She bought a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights under a holding company, renovated it in 3 weeks, and filled it with color, softness, books, and space. For herself. For her baby. For the life she was finally building, not surviving. She kept the silver gown from the gala, tucked in the back of her closet. Not as a reminder of pain, but as a trophy. The night she was publicly humiliated was the night she was reborn. She hadn't just survived Nathaniel Whitmore. She had outgrown him. And soon the world would see exactly who Clara Langston really was. 2 months later, no one recognized her. The Clara Hartley who once stood quietly at the edge of rooms, who smiled politely while her husband basked in applause, who whispered her opinions and folded her dreams into drawers, she was gone. In her place stood Clara Langston. She walked differently now. Head high, spine straight, like she belonged in every room she entered. Her voice didn't tremble anymore. It cut through silence with the confidence of someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to reclaim. Her first public appearance came at the Langston Foundation's Spring Gala, a rival to the very event where she had once been humiliated. And this time, she wasn't just a guest, she was the host. Held at the Met Cloisters, the gala felt like something out of a storybook. Ivy-covered walls, candlelit arches, violins echoing beneath vaulted ceilings. But all eyes weren't on the art. They were on her. Clara arrived in a floor-length white silk gown designed by a close friend in Paris, elegant, daring, and perfectly tailored to her pregnant figure. She was 7 months along and glowing, not just from motherhood, but from power. From peace, from freedom. The photographers didn't just snap her picture. They chased it. Flashbulbs exploded as she stepped from a black Rolls-Royce, escorted not by a PR handler or security guard, but by Ethan Vale, CEO of Vale Group, a billionaire in his own right and a longtime family ally. Ethan, tall and notoriously private, offered her his arm. The internet would later explode with headlines, "Clara Langston returns, and she's not alone." Billionaire heiress, pregnant, powerful, and unapologetic. Nathaniel saw it too. He was halfway through a tense board meeting when his phone lit up with notifications. At first, he ignored them. But when the chairman of his board cleared his throat and turned the screen of his iPad toward him, Nathaniel froze. There she was, Clara, radiant, pregnant, unbothered. Not a victim, not broken, thriving. It felt like a slap. He hadn't seen her since the gala. He thought she would fade away, that she'd go quietly, licking her wounds in some quiet cottage or luxury rehab. He assumed he'd get a call from her lawyer, maybe a settlement discussion. Instead, she returned like a force of nature. And he was suddenly the one whose name carried a shadow. Investors pulled back, journalists started digging, whispers turned into articles, and those articles turned into investigations. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about character, about trust, about power shifting hands. Meanwhile, Clara wasn't chasing revenge. She was building legacy. She reopened the Langston Literacy Initiative, a dormant program once run by her grandmother to bring books and education into underserved schools across the country. She launched a podcast, Unwritten Women, featuring stories of women who rebuilt their lives after betrayal. The first episode? Hers. She didn't name Nathaniel. She didn't have to. Her voice, clear, warm, unflinching, spoke of pain, silence, and awakening. It went viral within hours. Soon she was fielding offers from publishers, networks, and nonprofits. She turned most of them down. Clara wasn't interested in being another media figure or motivational brand. She wanted impact. She wanted change. Her days were filled with meetings, strategy sessions, and nursery planning. Her nights were quiet, spent in the Brooklyn brownstone with candles, classical music, and the occasional kick from the baby that reminded her what all this was for. She kept her circle small. Ethan visited often, bringing takeout and updates on the boardrooms she used to avoid. "You know," he said one night, pouring her sparkling water, "you're scaring the hell out of a lot of very powerful men." Clara smiled. Good. She wasn't trying to scare anyone, but she wouldn't apologize if she did. Then came the award season. The Women in Tech and Philanthropy Summit, a notoriously selective event, announced Clara Langston as its keynote speaker. The theme? Visibility after silence. She stood on that stage in a tailored black jumpsuit, her hair pulled into a sleek bun, a silver pendant resting just above her belly. When she stepped up to the mic, the crowd hushed. "Not long ago," she began, "I thought the worst thing that could happen to a woman was being left." She paused. "I was wrong. The worst thing is losing yourself so slowly, so quietly, that you don't even realize it's happening." Her voice didn't shake, not once. "I spent years whispering in rooms where I should have been leading, smiling when I wanted to scream, dimming myself so someone else could shine. And the truth is, I thought that made me loyal, that it made me strong, that it made me a good wife, a good woman." She glanced at the sea of faces. But silence isn't strength, and disappearing isn't noble. And women, we are not made to be decorations in someone else's empire. Thunderous applause erupted. Nathaniel, watching from a hotel suite in Zurich, felt his stomach knot. She wasn't just reclaiming her voice, she was becoming a symbol, a movement. And she wasn't done yet. Back at her brownstone, Clara sat by the fireplace, her hand resting gently on her belly. The baby kicked again, stronger this time. She smiled. "Not long now, little one." She didn't fear what came next, because for the first time in her life she wasn't living in anyone's shadow. Not her husband's, not her grandmother's, not society's. She had stepped into her own light. And the world? It was finally paying attention. It began with an invitation. Hand-delivered, cream envelope, gold lettering. The Whitmore Annual Innovation Gala, 10th Anniversary Celebration. Clara stared at it for a long time. The same event, the same marble mansion, the same man. 1 year ago, this gala had broken her. Now it was her stage. Her lawyer advised against going. "You've already won the public," he said. "You don't owe him anything." But Clara wasn't going for closure. She was going for clarity. There's a difference. The night of the gala, storm clouds rolled in like fate. Guests arrived in Lamborghinis and blacked-out SUVs, umbrellas fluttering, heels clicking across the marble steps. Inside, the Whitmore estate glowed. Lavish, arrogant, louder than ever. Champagne poured like water. Laughter echoed against glass walls. And then, she arrived. No one saw the car. No one saw her exit. They only saw her enter. Clara Langston walked through the front doors wearing a crimson velvet gown that clung to every curve of her 7 months postpartum figure like a crown. No husband, no entourage, just her. Stronger, smarter, sharper. The music didn't stop, but the room did. Heads turned. Conversations halted. 1,000 whispered rumors hung in the air. "She came? Is that?" "She looks unreal." Nathaniel was halfway through a toast when he noticed the shift. The camera flashes, the silence, the collective intake of breath. He turned and saw her. For the first time in months, he was speechless. She walked past him, calm as ever, every step a statement. No anger, no bitterness, just presence. Like a queen returning to the throne someone else thought they could steal. The crowd parted instinctively. Clara didn't smile, not yet. She waited near the back, declining drinks, declining attention, letting the tension build, letting them wonder why she was here. And then, just as Nathaniel began his speech, her voice cut through the room. "Before you begin," she said, clear, crisp, commanding, "I have something to say." He froze. The microphone crackled. She stepped forward, slow and certain, heels echoing like thunder across the marble floor. Someone handed her the mic without question. She turned to the audience. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. "I know this is a night to celebrate innovation, to honor vision, to spotlight leadership, but tonight I'd like to speak about illusion." A ripple moved through the crowd. Nathaniel shifted uncomfortably behind her. She continued, "1 year ago, I stood in this room, 6 months pregnant, alone, betrayed, silenced. I was told I wasn't good enough, pretty enough, useful enough." She paused, scanning the sea of familiar faces. "I was told I looked disgusting." Murmurs, gasps. Everyone remembered now. She turned slightly, just enough for Nathaniel to see the fire in her eyes. "But the thing about people who underestimate you is they teach you where your power really lives." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small device. With one tap, a projector lit up the wall behind her. A slideshow began. Screenshots, documents, photos. Not tabloids, not rumors. Proof, emails, financial documents, business memos with Nathaniel's signature. Clara looked directly at the board members seated near the front. "These," she said, "are records from the past 18 months. Unauthorized asset transfers, fraudulent branding claims, manipulation of marital IP to inflate investor confidence." She turned to the guests. "These documents show how my name, my image, and my silence were used as leverage in deals I was never informed about." Dead silence. Even the music stopped now. Nathaniel stepped forward, face pale. "Clara, what are you doing?" She turned toward him, unblinking. "What you should have done, Nathaniel, telling the truth." Security didn't stop her. No one did. She walked off the stage, dropped the mic, literally, and exited with the same grace she entered with. Outside, the rain began to fall. She didn't run. She strolled through it like a woman on fire. By morning, the headlines exploded. Clara Langston exposes Whitmore Empire at his own gala. From betrayed wife to billionaire powerhouse. Nathaniel Whitmore under internal investigation following gala bombshell. Clara didn't comment. She didn't need to. The documents had already been forwarded to the SEC. Her legal team had prepared every step. She didn't want his money. She wanted his illusion. And she tore it down in front of the very people who once praised him. Nathaniel's stock plummeted. Board members resigned. Partnerships dissolved. By Friday, he was removed as CEO pending legal review. By Monday, Clara was on a plane to Santorini with her son. Not to escape, to rest, to breathe, to begin the life she'd earned. She stayed in a private villa overlooking the sea, her mornings filled with baby laughter and espresso, her evenings with books, soft jazz, and the occasional message from someone new. Ethan texted her one night. "That was legendary," she smiled. Typed back, "Just clearing space." He replied, "What for?" She hesitated, then wrote, "Whatever I want to build next." She looked at her son, sleeping peacefully. She touched the necklace around her neck. 3 small stars, the gift from her grandmother. Clara Langston didn't just take back her voice, she turned it into thunder. And the world? It was still echoing. The waves kissed the rocks below as the Greek sun dipped behind the cliffs of Santorini, casting the sky in pinks and golds. Clara sat on the terrace of her villa, barefoot, wrapped in a linen robe, her son asleep nearby in a bassinet beneath a gauzy canopy. She watched the sunset the way one watches a fire they survived, awed, grateful, and aware of everything it consumed. It had been 6 months since the gala, 6 months since she stood in front of a crowd that once pitied her and burned a kingdom built on lies to the ground. The world had changed since then, or maybe she had. People stopped calling her the wife. They stopped labeling her as abandoned or betrayed. Now she was introduced as Clara Langston, author, investor, mother, strategist, keynote speaker, survivor, but most importantly, she was herself. She had built something from the ashes, not for show, not for headlines. For her son, for every woman who had once sat in silence, wondering if she was asking for too much by simply wanting to be respected. That evening, Clara opened her laptop. A live feed was waiting. She had agreed to deliver the closing keynote for the Women Reclaiming Power Summit, a virtual of 800,000 live viewers. A year ago, she might have doubted herself. Now, she spoke like a woman with nothing to prove and everything to offer. The screen flickered to life. She smiled, calm and poised. "Good evening," she began. "Before I say anything else, I want to start with a truth. I used to believe my softness made me weak." She paused, letting the words settle. "I believed that being kind meant being quiet, that loving deeply meant surrendering completely, that to keep a man, you had to lose yourself slowly enough that he didn't notice." A few heads nodded across the video screens. "I learned the hard way that shrinking doesn't keep people close. It just makes you easier to ignore." She breathed in, steady. "But here's the thing. Women are not built to break quietly." More nods, some tears. "I was told I wasn't enough, that I was too emotional, too sensitive, too quiet, too inconvenient. And for a long time I believed that, until the silence started choking me, until the very thing I sacrificed everything for, my marriage, told me I was disgusting while carrying life inside me." The chat on the feed exploded. Hearts, fire emojis, comments like, "Say it louder. This is my story too. I'm crying." Clara continued, her voice steady but strong. "I'm not telling you this because I want your sympathy. I don't need it. I found something far more powerful, my voice." She leaned closer to the camera. "And here's what I want every woman listening to know. Your voice is not a weapon. It's not a weakness. It's a torch. It burns away the lies you've been taught. The ones that say you're only valuable if you're quiet, if you're pretty, if you're loyal, even when it hurts." She sat back. "Loyalty without respect is self-destruction." The audience sat in rapt silence. Some of you are in your own versions of that penthouse, that boardroom, that relationship. You're walking on eggshells, second-guessing your worth, trying to fit into someone else's mold. Her eyes softened. "I see you," she smiled. "You are not broken. You are not crazy. You are not too much." She let the silence sit. "You're waking up." She reached for a small gold necklace around her neck, the same one her grandmother once wore. 3 stars. A symbol passed down, woman to woman. "My grandmother used to say, we come from a long line of fire starters. We just forgot we had matches." She glanced at the baby monitor screen beside her where her son slept peacefully. "I didn't start a war," she said softly. "I ended a performance." And then, for the first time that evening, her voice cracked. "I didn't leave to punish anyone. I left because I refused to let my son grow up watching his mother disappear." Her eyes glistened, but the smile never left her face. "So to every woman who's ever been told she's replaceable, invisible, or a burden, please hear this. You are none of those things. You are the whole damn story." The crowd erupted in applause. Clara breathed deeply, her soul lighter. She closed with a simple truth. "I lost everything I thought made me valuable. And then I found myself. And I was more powerful than I had ever been before." She looked into the lens, steady and still. "And so are you." The screen faded to black. Later that night, Clara rocked her son to sleep, his tiny hand wrapped around her finger. The world outside was still chaotic, but inside this villa, peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because she no longer needed it to be. She had risen, she had roared, and she had reminded the world of something too many forget. Women don't break, they rebuild, with gold in their cracks and fire in their bones.